Hi guys, how's it going? My name is Thomas. I'll be sharing a short talk on my experience being a junior and also giving tips those struggling like me. So, so a bit of background, I'm from Indonesia. You guys would probably recall Bali, but I'm more familiar with the traffic in Jakarta. I pursued a bachelor's degree in computer science and completed a web development bootcamp in Lewagen. And you guys might be wondering, despite my qualifications, finding a job's been challenging. And why? Because I feel like I still lack the confidence. So it made me go into this whole of tutorial health buying courses or watching 4 or 5 hours of YouTube just to learn. So what I did not do right back then was it was inefficient. There was no plan, there was no strategy. So I figured I needed someone who understands my situation better to kind of get me out of there. And this brings me to my first tip on trying to reach out or find a mentor. So go to LinkedIn, go ask people, go ask companies for advice or at where you want to work. Go to meetups, go to events. In this case, would be like this Roro. And but for the past 4 months, I wasn't able to attend this offline because I was stuck in Indonesia. So the next best thing for me was to go reach out to Roro Slack community. And lucky enough, I've connected with Michael. He's pretty popular around this community, so some of you guys should recognize him. Anyways, he was kind enough to set up a session with me, like a coding session in Zoom. And setting up a session it's easy, right? The Zoom session. Well, for me, it's not. This brings me to my next point is remote communications. Obviously, you guys will be using Zoom, Slack, or Discord to do pairing sessions. I stumbled a lot of issues like sending invites to Michael or have issues sharing screen our first session. And on top of that, in Indonesia, there was a 3 hour time difference. And internet was very not good there. So make sure you have everything set up properly to make it smooth for you and your mentor. And also have whiteboards for brainstorming and mind mapping. You could use Excalibur, Figma, or Miro. These are great ways for you to convey your messages. And I think pictures are easier to get your messages out there better to other people. And all it takes are just a couple of boxes, text and arrows. So you're doing your pairing sessions with your mentor. Do a couple of exercises with them so they know what competency you're at and they know what you need to improve on. I'm going to share a couple of tips I took from Michael. So firstly is test-driven development. So what is it? It's basically writing code, writing your test case first, running it red, implementing the feature, and refactoring the code further. How do we do this? Well, I like to use Exercism to practice this. Well, it's an open source application where it trains our coding muscle. It's challenges similar to like LeetCode and HackerRank. But why I like this over them is because the syllabus, I think, is more friendly and focusing more on your fundamentals. There's a local environment which you can work on the challenges in your code editor offline. And there's also mentor's advice. So you can submit your code, submit your challenges, and you can have mentors review it for you. For those who don't have that set up, you can set it up pretty simple. Just copy the line of code. You can set up brew, exercism configure. Don't forget to give your API token. And if you want to have the challenge downloaded to your machine, you can copy that one below. It's usually in every exercism challenges. Copy it to your terminal. So let's run the first test. This is a hello world challenge in Ruby. And you can see it's failing. Just check the test file, see what it's asking. implement the feature, and run the test again. And once all the tests pass, all you have to do is submit to exorcism with the keyword exorcism submit. And yeah, that's all it is. You can see your solution once you refresh it. Obviously, it's a really simple problem to solve test-driven development. So this brings me to Kara's coding dojo. So what is it? It's basically in martial arts, kata is a fighting sequence that you perform repeatedly so the students can get a muscle memory of it. Well, similarly in software development, we write kata, snippets of code we write often repeatedly daily to build muscle memory or coding muscle memory to practice our craft. These are a couple of challenges they give from the website. And why kata? So as a junior, I think, in my opinion, employers often want to see juniors solve coding challenges. And this involves setting up a project, using Git properly, and doing test-driven development. So let's try to set up a simple project. First, you need to create a directory for the project. I usually add the date in the end if I want to do a couple of problems over and over again. And these lines of code allows me to initialize my gem file and testing. In this case, I would use RSpec for testing. So what we're doing here is a tennis scoring game from one of Kata's challenges. And for the first test, for a tennis game, at the beginning of the game, we should return love all. And how do we implement it? Well, I was thinking in my head, okay, let's try store the points for love, for 15, for 30 into a hash, and we can fetch it. But I got too far, thinking ahead. Michael just told me, just solve the first test case and you'll deal with all that later. Then this test-driven development idea clicked to me, because during uni, I wasn't taught to do any of this. In every assignments, all the test cases were always hidden, and I got to solve it, everything at once. So this pretty much was an eye-opening for me. And after making my first test green, and no other way to refactor that, you can make your first commit. And afterwards, we'll do our next test, which is to find a way to make a server score a point. But I won't go too much in depth, so let's go to the next problem. I had a lot of fun doing the tennis kata with Michael, and I asked him for any other ones, and he recommended me the classic Conway's Game of Life. So it's basically a two by two dimensional grid where each cell is either alive or dead. And to compute the next generation, any live cell should, with fewer than 2 live neighbors, will die. The first one, and any live cell with more than 2 or 3 live neighbor will live on to the next generation, and any dead cells with exactly 3 live neighbors will be alive again. So I was spending hours figuring out how to do it, whether I should have a class of game, a board, and a cell, or should I just put everything in one class? And so what's the best architectural plan to go? And how do I start testing? So I basically was stuck, and I looked at the internet. I saw this person's solution, how they tested it. It helped me clear my head on where to start. And in the solution, it's just asking like, oh, test for no neighbors, test for 1 neighbor, test for 2 neighbors. So I started small. I started small, so okay, it's a grid, right? So there should be an array of array. So now let's test for 1 neighbor, let's test for 2 neighbors, and so on. So here's a snippet of the code I wrote. I decided to write an array of array to initialize the cells with dead ones. And another test I set up cells with live ones. And I use hash for live cells and dots to indicate the dead ones. And obviously it isn't perfect because I could have done all this with a 3x3 rather than a 10x10. But nonetheless, I ended up with this. So from Kata's coding requirements, I managed to get all the test cases working. There might be more tests, but this should do it for now. Overall, I realized my train of thought on working on the problem was to try start small and work your way up from there, which made this kind of fun for me. After it was done, I showed Michael and he said, take it to the next level. Why not use a terminal to display this in real time? We could use cursors. So cursors is a gem which has the ability to paint and remove characters on the terminal. And it's basically a cheap animation you can set up in your CLI. And together in 5 minutes, we made a simple snake demo that looks funky, but he told me to try apply this to your game of life. With a basic understanding of it, I scoured online. I found someone using cursors as well in their game of life. And from their code, I learned I could use colors with it. So I got down to something like this. And from the logic and with the cursors library, I managed to get this. It's a Gosper's glider. The pattern's a Gosper's glider, but the ones that are green are the live ones and the white ones are the dead ones. So overall, coming back to my point with Kata, why is it good? Because for me, it helps practice my test-driven development. It gives me a chance to mess around with other technologies. It trains my coding muscle and it gives me a sense of accomplishment. So to wrap this up, so my tips for juniors out there or anyone who's struggling, make sure to reach out if you're ever stuck. Make sure you have a messaging app ready. So like sharing screen or any security permissions, make sure you get it all done. So there won't be any awkward moments with your mentor. Also practice your test-driven development because I think it's important for jobs right now. And present at Roro or share experience doing talk like this. Or you could write a blog as well. Thanks again for listening. If you're ever an employer looking to hire a junior, I'm right here. If, if you're a junior who wants to work on Kata problems, you can message me at LinkedIn over there. Here. Or you can also see my GitHub and my website to check out what I'm working on. I'll share my GitHub repo in Slack if anyone ever wants to see the game of life. And thanks for listening. Any questions? Yeah. What? Yeah.
Yeah, so with the kata stuff,
Uh-huh.
is the idea that every time you sit down to do some practice on the kata that you're doing a new problem, or do you ever go back and redo the same ones to sort of train it?
I think the point of Kata was to do the same ones over and over because you can do the test cases differently. So yeah.
How much value do you find?
Because you see, you'll get other perspective and working it over and over. So I think that's what I take away from doing katas.
Thanks.
All good. Any other questions? Yeah.
What was your favorite pattern to practice?
Game of life, I guess. That's why I made it up. It was interesting for me, like with all the Wikipedia in it.
All the different patterns you
Mhm.
can. Yeah.
Yep, all good. So I'll wrap this up. I'll post the my link in the Slack if anyone wants to see what my game of life looks like. Thank
Thank
you.
you.